to let you know that it's Edith Wallace's birthday today. And I feel that she was singing that to us, but she was also singing it perhaps to herself, which is a wonderful thing. And you bring so much love, Edith. I hope you get that. Good. Well, the unity movement. What is it? What is the unity movement? You know, for about 115 years now, it has been pouring forth its love into the world through the teachings. I've been involved in this movement for over, almost 45 years now. And sometimes it's kind of hard to exactly define what unity is. But during one of the times of transition that my wife and I were in between churches, we went to a Baptist church in Kansas City, Missouri. And the minister was aware of unity. And he said, you know, unity is like a breath of fresh air. And that he likened it to being similar to when St. Francis came into the world about 800 years ago. That the religiosity of the time had become so crystallized and so conditional, but Francis, was all about it being about love, compassion, and respect for the natural world, for animals and plants, and just a whole nother unfoldment of a way of being, of how to treat life. And I would assert that that is what unity is also about. And being in this thought heart culture called unity, I make certain assumptions sometimes that people are familiar with it, and that's an assumption. Some people don't know exactly what it's really about. But if I could distill it down, it really is about a center of awakening, a nexus point within the consciousness of humankind, an opportunity for awakening. And a week and a half or so ago, we had a board meeting and talking about mission, and we kind of came to a conclusion, or at least a consensus within this center, that it is a center of awakening. And that's a beautiful thing. For you, in your life, right where you are right now, that you have the possibility for awakening into a greater self-knowing of what it is and who it is that you are. So, what is the result of that? Well, it's really a decrease and a release of suffering and a claiming of a beautiful way of life that has always been there for you, has always been held within, as we say, the mind of God. And that our work is to release anything that isn't that love. So there is a process. My wife and I saw or heard of a bumper sticker the other day that said, "Let go or you will be dragged." And we both chuckled that is kind of the way it is, that we'll be dragged. So unity isn't a religion. It's really a promotion of the greatest meaning of what religion is supposed to be for our lives. Religion, as I have mentioned on occasion here, comes from the Latin, which is religare, which means to knit back together again or to realign with one's true purpose, one's authentic nature. And that word, as we know, has tossed around quite a bit these days in human conversation, what's authentic, what is integrous, what is real. And when I look at that word authentic, I see the word author. Author. And you may say, if I asked, who is the author of your life? You may say, well, I am. Taking a firm stand that I am in control of my life and no one else. And that is a stand to take around being authentic. But I would assert to you that that is only partially true. That the author of our life is something that we can call God, but we have different names for that if we don't like that word, or it reminds us too much of our past. We can call it spirit, or oneness, or divine intelligence, or divine mother, heavenly Father, whatever it is that we choose. But what is God? What is this presence and power? And as we move through the process of letting go of the religiosity of our past, we may become confused at times about what it is that God is. Ramana Maharshi, the great Eastern saint, doesn't so much focus on what God is, but he asks a pivotal question of each person. Who am I? Not about him, but the person, us, asking ourselves, who am I? And that is a doorway to a greater understanding of what God is. So that you and I are in a co-creative relationship with the divine. And that may feel and seem scary. That may feel and seem too much responsibility. But you and I are made in the divine image of our Creator. And we can run and hide and distract ourselves from that great truth as long as we choose, because the Spirit's love for us is not with conditions. That we are eternal beings and we can put claiming that off forever. But why not choose to embrace and to be embraced in a co-creative relationship with our Creator, to claim our good, to let go of holding on to suffering as a definition of what it is that we are. So awakening is really about recognizing that the author of our lives is indeed our own being. But what is the nature and what is the genesis of this life force that's flowing through us all the time? Do we create that? Or is it something that is flowing through like a river of good? Today's message is paths are many and truth is one, and I want to talk about that at some length, but I also want to talk about the love that Edith was mentioning in the innocence of her own birth, really, and that's what I saw when she was singing about that, at least for me. Her mother's love, looking at her, I love you, I love you, I love you. And we all desire that. My grandmother, and I've shared this at least once here, but my grandmother in her 90th year made her transition, and she appeared to my cousin Steve in his apartment the day after she passed, and she was so real. Steve said, "Grandma, what are you doing here?" And she said, "I've come with a message before I move on." She said, "Show love." It never fails. Love is the total understanding of everything that is. And then she disappeared. And my cousin Steve called his mother and said, Grandma was just here. And Lee said, "Well, that's not possible because she just died yesterday and I was going to call and tell you today." But that's how real the love of Spirit is. And if we are having a challenge in our life situation, we can always turn to that love. It is forever there with us. So paths are many, truth is one. That title came to me this past week because in 1979 I was at Unity Village, which is the headquarters of Unity, the Unity movement. And it was a YOU conference, and there was like 600 teens there. I was a sponsor. I was 22 years old. And I remember being, as a sponsor, I had to legislate the behavior of 5 other young men that were in a motel room. And at Unity Village at that time, there was a yellow line between motel areas. And on the other end, the other side of that line was where all the girls were staying. And I was just a couple years older than most of these young guys, and boy, did they want to get out that door. They wanted to go visit and be with, and I had strict directions not to allow that to happen. And that was an interesting situation. I totally understood, being 22, what they desired, but we had to uphold a certain standard. But Paths Are Many, Truth Is One was a song that a band was playing at one of the, during the day in the large convention center that's just probably 3 times as large as this room. And Unity as an organization has always invited different paths, different religions to be represented, because there's great respect for all faiths. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity movement, while in the silence, in prayer, he really got it that all faiths have an essential unity underneath the surface mental interpretation. And so, what is unity? It is a path that lovingly beholds all faiths as important, because underneath that surface level is an essential unity that points to the truth of being. If those paths are clear, sometimes the mind makes up all types of stories around the original teachings of a voice for God, a prophet, or a seer, or someone that's very, very clear. Unity really stays to a place of staying away from all that denominational interpretation. We are not denominational. Actually, we're pro-denominational, because all faiths are honored. And yet there is a core within the unity movement, within this faith transition, that is essentially Christ-oriented. What does that mean, Christ? Sometimes people get upset with that word. Is it a religion? Is it a person? Is it a code of behavior? It is, or what is it actually? Charles Fillmore also said that the Christ is a divine idea of universal love. It is a vibration. It is an energy that can be experienced by anyone at any time if we are clear and if we allow our feelings and thoughts to be within a vibration of its presence. And that is one of the main reasons why in this room we have meditation, so that we move beyond concepts and beliefs where people have a direct experience. I was speaking with somebody just the other day, and he was at a major conference here in town, and a lot of millennial people, young people were there, and I asked him, well, what sense did you get from the millennials, the people in their 20s and 30s at this time? And he said, they're skeptical of authority. Skeptical of authority. And I said, well, that's good. Because they don't want to be following someone else's rules. They're wanting to have their own experience of love, of authentic love. And authentic love isn't about emotion, it is about a felt knowing of one's own experience and one's own relationship with the divine. So in this conversation that we're having, there's an intention on my part when we address what is unity as a movement in consciousness to bring all of the faiths of this planet together under a certain knowing of unity, of oneness with each other. And so I thought to myself, well, what is it that unites all of us? What is a cross-the-board way of being that is relatable to all of us? And what came to me was something that is called the Golden Rule. Well, in Christian theology, that is fairly clear to all of us, but some of you may not know that that is a universal. It is part of the universal truth. And if we're looking for anything in this search for authentic experience, it is looking for universal truth behind any one faith tradition. When you think about gold, as in the Golden Rule, gold is a highly prized substance. And in tales of old, there was this intention of alchemy, of alchemists, long ago to turn base metal into gold. That's a metaphor. Right now, right here in your life, you are endeavoring, no doubt, on some level, to turn base emotions, feeling states, concepts into the gold of actual felt knowing. And the religions of the world are doing the same. And I would like to share with you, because some of the statements around this golden rule from the world's religions. Hinduism says, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. The ancient Egyptians said, do for one who may do for you, that you may cause him thus to do. Confucianism. A man named a student of Confucius stated or asked, is there one word that can serve as a principle of conduct for all of life? And Confucius replied, it is the word shu, which means reciprocity. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. And in Christianity, which also mirrors Judaism in a way, therefore all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. I don't know if Jesus spoke in ye's and thou's, but that's the King James Version. Buddhism states, a state that is not pleasing or delightful to me, how could I inflict that upon another? Brahmanism, this is the sum of dharma or duty. Do not unto others which would cause you pain if done to you. And also the teaching of Baha'i, the Baha'i faith, says, ascribe not to any soul that which thou wouldst not have ascribed to thee, and say not that which thou dost not. Blessed is he who preferreth his brother before himself. So a word that stood out here for me was reciprocity. My feeling is that all of civilization, of getting along with brothers and sisters in every culture and every time, has to do with reciprocity. That the golden rule of doing to others is not only behavioral, but it has something else to do with respect, with what Charles Fillmore called the life principle. The life principle. And that comes, out of that life principle comes this premise of the law of mind action, of what we're putting out there imprints upon to life, and then it comes back to us. It's really quite simple, really, that life, in a sense, is a mirror. There's a Unity minister of some years back. Her name was Martha Smock. And she said from her book, Halfway Up the Mountain, she said, you are a spiritual being, an immortal soul on an immortal journey, and God is with you every step of the way. You are meant for greatness and for mountaintop living. So even though you and I go through the valleys sometimes of shadows and doubts and fears, you and I are meant for mountaintop living. So I would invite you for just a moment. If we are meant for mountaintop living, if we are meant to experience this good, I invite you to do something that might take a little bit of courage. It's an exercise. Is it possible for you in this moment to look at the person that's next to you, even if you don't know them, and say, I see God in you? Can you do that? Can you do that with her? Because even in this sanctuary right now, if we hadn't done that, we would just be simply sitting singularly in our seats without having a felt knowing of the other as being part of God. And I ask myself, why is that so challenging for us sometimes? You know, in the East, I remember this story of a priest walking down the street, Catholic priest, and he was having a real hard time. And he walked up to a man, and he said, may I gain a witness from you? And the man put down all of his stuff that he was carrying. Didn't even know him. And he just said, Namaste. And the priest started to tell him some of the things that he was challenged with. And it is a part of that culture to say Namaste, which means I behold God in you, irrespective or regardless of one's stuff. That's part of the culture. To at any moment take time to listen and to say, I behold God in you. What would happen if we did that on 41st and Oak Street? Maybe you, as a way of being in your homecoming work this coming week, you could do that with somebody. Would that take us a lot to get out of our own comfort zone? I mean, you think about it in this moment. Maybe somebody was sitting right next to you. You didn't know them. And you looked at them. And you said, I behold God in you. That's too intimate. I don't know if I want to go there, Bruce. It makes me uncomfortable. But a minister's job is to afflict the comfortable and to comfort the afflicted. So this is a place of growth. And what does that mean? It means that we're going to go beyond our concepts. To feel free within an atmosphere of this room to say we're all spiritual family here and that we can move beyond our boundaries and yet being respectful at the same time. Not everybody is in a place where they're going to say, turn to the next person and say, I behold God in you. Because sometimes people are really having a hard time, right? But that's really the principle. Awakening is about being in a place where all people are part of the same, cut from the same cloth. Even though there's people that we have never met. I was in a Chinese restaurant the other day, and I ordered some soup. And I said, are there vegetables in that soup? This is a beautiful Asian waitress. And I said, are there vegetables in the soup? And she said, no. Just noodles and chicken and broth. And I said, do you eat vegetables? And she said, oh, yes. I said, why aren't there vegetables in the soup? So she might have thought, well, you're kind of a bother and a pill, right? I mean, the soup is just the soup. You want some soup or not? But I wasn't being antagonistic. I was kind of like she was like a sister, right? Do you like vegetables? And she smiled. I like vegetables. But there was this commonality. Some young lady that was from a whole other country, but we were relating. That was my intention. I wasn't complaining about the vegetables, even though I wanted some. But it was about, who are you, other than just my waitress? You are part of spirit. You're part of the life principle. You're part of God. And that's the beauty, that you can take risks like that. You can take little tiny risks with people, and what happens is that it opens up a conversation where the fulfillment of her day perhaps was upped just a little bit, other than just being the waitress, bringing soup. So it's a constant conversation about how to create more intimacy with each other. And to me, that's the core of spiritual community. So that you don't leave here today feeling empty and lonely and that nobody saw you. And that was the whole intention behind saying during the greeting time, meet somebody that you don't know. Because we never know what people are going through, right? We never know until we care enough to say, how are you? It's a constant cultivation of love. Stepping out of that little box. Sri Yukteswar, the teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda, I'll never forget this. He said of Yogananda, make the supreme effort. Make the supreme effort. Go beyond what is comfortable. You have freedom to do as you choose, obviously. But this is the path. This is the meaning behind all of the faith traditions of this world on this planet. There is an intention of unity because this planet was made and created, and we were made and created by divinity. We're not meant to be isolated and separated from each other and in pain and loneliness and sitting in our houses going, gosh, I wish somebody would call, I'm so darn lonely. Or maybe I should call because I'm having such a hard time. This is about us really loving each other. This is what these teachings have unveiled in me. Is it easy? No. Is it necessary? I think so. It's what the world is up for now. Real experience. Thank you.